Hi, my name is Danny Avdia's cousin, and this is a message to Dave Chappelle, which he probably will not hear, but I still had to get off my chest. Because, as you may have heard, Chappelle's latest Netflix special, The Unstoppable, just dropped, and some people think it was a little hard on the Jews. Let's just say that it wasn't very easy Jews-wise. Now, I know that breaking down jokes and being too serious about comedy is really not a good look, but Chappelle's work is way more than comedy. He's a commentator, an astute one, that goes miles beyond the regular day-to-day relatable observations. He has principles and morals, and he uses his immense talent to convey those to millions of people in America and around the world. He's one of the best to ever do it, and earned every right to have his work broken down and discussed and even get deeply disturbed by. And The Unstoppable is yet another brilliant piece of storytelling with a social and political analysis, and it starts with a shot at Bill Maher.
You know, and Bill Maher, the famous comedian, I've known Bill since I was like 18, 19 years old, and I've never said this publicly, but fuck that guy. I'm so fucking tired of this little smug, cracker-ass commentary. These motherfuckers act like because I did a comedy festival in Saudi Arabia, I somehow betrayed my principles. They said, well, Saudi Arabia killed a journalist. And rest in peace, Jamal Khashoggi. I'm sorry that he got murdered in such a heinous fashion. But, and no buts, like, you know, period. And also, I mean, look, bro, Israel's killed 240 journalists in the last 3 months. So I didn't know y'all was still counting.
What kind of a lame excuse is that? Let's break it down. People were criticizing you for doing a show in Saudi Arabia, which I thought was bullshit criticism to begin with, and to be honest, so did Bill Maher. But you evaded that criticism by comparing the murder of Jamal Khashoggi to the death of journalists in a completely unrelated war? That's next level. Because I have to tell you all, when I heard the crowd cheering to that bit by Chappelle, two of my most Jewish of instincts immediately kicked in. One is finding shelter, but two is finding loopholes. Is it possible that you could get away with anything by deflecting to Israel?
Who is the person who has publicly accused me of misconduct regarding women? It doesn't exist, right? It is just an op. And it was an op to silence me, and Israel was involved.
Okay, I know that I sound like I'm part of the op, but Matt Gaetz, the former congressman from Florida, he was accused by the US Congress of having sex with a 17-year-old. So what did he do? He deflected to Israel, which probably worked with the Tucker crowd just as it did with the Chappelle crowd, who swallowed that lame argument, no questions asked. So let's dive in. First of all, 240 journalists is a completely made-up number. I haven't found one source that cites 240 journalists killed in the entire year, let alone the 3 months leading to the filming of the special in October. None. And I looked at the most anti-Israeli establishments, not the Committee to Protect Journalists, not Reporters Without Border, not Complex. No one even came close to 240 journalists. And even if it was true, which it isn't, you can't seriously compare it to the planned and vicious murder of Jamal Khashoggi, who, I remind you, went into the Saudi consulate in Turkey to handle his divorce papers so he can marry his new fiancée, who was waiting outside the consulate for hours as the Saudis tortured and butchered him. And I know you're thinking, well, I know at least 5 worse divorce stories, and that is probably true. But nonetheless, Saudi did something that the Israelis wouldn't have done in 1,000 years. They intentionally and gruesomely murdered a journalist critical of the crown as to deter others from criticizing it. And that is why you can perform in Saudi Arabia all you want, but you can't seriously say that.
Yeah, it's way easier to talk in Saudi Arabia.
Okay, this is a ridiculous statement which Chappelle made again and again. This is actually the same claim of which Bill Maher originally provided his smug cracker-ass commentary, and it's bonkers. Because one can and should demand more free speech in the US, that's even important for me as a Jew who likes free stuff. But you don't have to idolize a dictatorship to do that. You know very well that Saudi Arabia is not a beacon of freedom or peace. It's a beacon of money. It's a great place to live in if you're a rich Arab guy, but not so great for everyone else. It's kind of like London. So you can criticize the US cancel culture or Israel's war in Gaza, but do remember that the Saudis go to wars too. In Yemen, for example, between 2015 and 2022, a war that cost the life of hundreds of thousands and exposed more than 17 million Yemenis to famine and caused a cholera outbreak. And yet, as far as I know, that wasn't in your set in Saudi Arabia. Why? I mean, you have been consistently public and outspoken against the wars waged by America or Israel. I even recall you once quoting Noam Chomsky, the American pacifist, in a speech you gave when Jon Stewart won the Mark Twain Award.
As we've all learned in our lives, wartime is crazy in America. They do what Noam Chomsky called manufacture consent, and the news was off the chain. And John was the only voice that helped people decipher that madness.
Yes, he was. He was a clear voice that dared to challenge his nation in a time of war, which brings us once again to your original false point, that it's easier to speak in Saudi Arabia than in America. You know, one of Jamal Khashoggi's points of criticism of the Crown Prince was the war in Yemen. Just 2 weeks before he was murdered, he published an op-ed in the Washington Post demanding of the Crown Prince to end this cruel war. Well, they manufactured his consent, I can tell you that. And by the way, if we're on the subject of Noam Chomsky, couldn't he have shared some of his theories of consent with his buddy Jeffrey Epstein? I'm sorry, I digress, but these two Jews actually provide a decent segue to the even crazier part of The Unstoppable, where Chappelle talks about conspiracy theories of a systemic effort of oppression. Actually, he spends the last 40 minutes of his act talking about conspiracy theories, and about how we all live inside one, as he assures the crowd that, quote, "You are not the only one feeling it, and you are not going crazy, I feel it too." Now, I have to point out, I know he didn't say Jews, but really this is exactly the kind of vibe you normally feel when things aren't about to go pro-Semitic. You know what I mean? It has happened time and again. When societies know civil unrest, people always feel like they're a step behind and that someone else is one step ahead. And it's always these guys. It happened in Europe, in the Arab world, even in the States at some time, which is why it was so painful for me to hear Chappelle close that conspiracy bit with this joke.
My voice has become more powerful than I intended it to be. And I cannot let these niggas do me like Charlie Kirk, or even worse than that. What if these niggas trip me up somehow, co-opt me, and then make me say the things that they want me to say? We need a code. It's gotta be something that I can say so that if I say it, you know that these niggas got me. The code word is, I stand with Israel. Thank you very much, and good night.
Such a good joke. Okay, again, explaining other people's jokes is not a wise career move for a comic, but I don't care. I'm not an American comedian. I only perform in Israel and Saudi Arabia. So what Chappelle is doing here is first implying he will never genuinely stand with Israel, which is fine. But the more nuanced part of the joke is that anyone who says they stand with Israel has probably been somehow compromised, co-opted, as though supporting Israel only makes sense in the context of a conspiracy. And just like gym tryouts today mandatory, that is a bad sign for Jews. And if you ask me, it's a bad sign for all Americans. Because in Israel, we live under a threat designed specifically to make us choose between our security and our morals. Americans don't have that kind of fear. Your existence is not questionable. You are not slaughtered by radicals who kidnapped your civilians and held them in tunnels underneath innocent people. If it had happened to you, you would face unimaginable dilemmas. Some you would get right, some probably not. But just like with the free speech debate around Saudi Arabia and the US, Chappelle is too privileged to even tell right from wrong. Now, I've been a Dave Chappelle fan my whole life. I was 10 when he dropped Killing Them Softly, and 14 when he dropped For What It's Worth. And these were two of the most influential pieces of comedy I could ever dream of watching. I celebrated his comeback of the century, where he rose above the highest expectations any comedian has ever faced. I will forever consider him a true artist. But watching this special didn't feel like the funny, optimistic, people-loving Chappelle. It felt like a man with no true principles, just love for power and money. And you know how I call people like that? I call them Jews.